John Boehner and company have been telling us for years that the United States is in the throes of a mortal sovereign debt crisis. But on Sunday, he changed his mind.
We do not have an immediate debt crisis, but we all know that we have one looming. And we have one looming because we have entitlement programs that are not sustainable in their current form. They're going to go bankrupt.
How long do we have to solve our problems?
Nobody knows where this is. It could be a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It's not an immediate problem, but we can all...
So you agree with the president on that?
Yes, but his point...
Great. Boehner and President Obama finally agree on something, right? Not so fast. As David Sirota points out in a Monday column for Salon.com, the GOP has known all along that American sovereign debt is not as big an issue as it would have us believe. In reality, the right has just been using this manufactured debt crisis to push through the same radically regressive policies they've been hustling since the Reagan years. David is absolutely correct. History backs him up, whether it's been the supposed threat of weapons of mass destruction or communist infiltration. Republicans have never failed to let a good fake crisis go to waste. Now they're using the myth of runaway entitlement spending to scare us into obedience. Here to talk about his article on the right's ideological crusade against our government is David Sirota, contributor to Salon.com and author of several books, including Back to Our Future, How the 1980s Explain the World We Live in Now, Our Culture, Our Politics, Our Everything. David, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. So why the change of heart for Boehner? We've gone from, oh my God, hysteria, the world is falling apart, you know, over the last 4 years pretty continuously, to, could be a couple of years, who cares?
It's a good question. I mean, I can't explain why House Speaker Boehner went on TV and said this. And by the way, it was echoed almost immediately by Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan on the CBS Sunday show. So clearly, either Boehner created a new talking point or talking points were handed down to him. But it is an admission. It's an admission that while we do have long-term debt issues, that the whole idea that we're facing an imminent emergency, an idea that has been used to justify an austerity program that is radical and extreme, the whole idea that we have this imminent crisis, now the Republican leaders are admitting is simply not true. And I think this is a watershed moment in these budget battles because it says that there's something else going on here. It says that the Republican Party has an ulterior motive to have been pretending for so long that this is an immediate crisis.
Well, back in 76, Jude Wanniski came up with his two Santa Claus theory, where he overtly said to the Republican Party, when Republicans are in power, run up the debt as hard and as fast as you can and spend like crazy. It'll make, you know, good times, or appear to be good times. And then when Democrats come to power, scream about the debt. They've been absolutely consistently, ever since Reagan's presidency, following Wanniski's advice. Why the sudden change?
It's a great question. And to me, why this is so important, why this weekend's comments were so important, is it because it should signal to folks that there's something else going on here. The strategy has been from the Republicans to create the perception of an imminent debt crisis. And so they've manufactured these crises, the fiscal cliff, the sequestration crisis, the debt ceiling crises. These are all manufactured. These are not out of our control. They're not out of Congress's control. They've manufactured the perception of a crisis to push through, or at least try to push through, extreme measures that they know polling tells them they can't pass unless there is a sense of panic. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. I mean, the biggest example of that is the Social Security cut. Social Security has essentially nothing to do with our long-term debt challenges. But if you claim and you create the perception that there's an imminent budget crisis, an imminent budget emergency, it logically will become more easy to pass Social Security cuts, even though they have nothing to do with the debt, even though the polls show the public opposes those, but it will be easier to pass them if you create the perception of a crisis. And so every single time going forward that the Republicans say that we're facing an imminent crisis and that justifies all sorts of policies that the public opposes, Americans should remember this weekend in which the Republicans admitted that they're playing a game.
Do you think, David, it's possible that the president has either beat them at their game and they know it, or that he's joined them in their game and said, okay, I'll give you some entitlement cuts, you got to give me something back, whatever, and that they're preparing, both sides are basically preparing to betray all the rest of us? Or
I think it's the latter.
Way too paranoid?
I think it's absolutely the latter. No, I think you're absolutely right. Look, President Obama has certainly been more honest in acknowledging that that we face long-term debt issues, but he is also putting forward an austerity budget that puts forward $3, or what is it, $2.50 in cuts for every dollar raised in revenue at a time when taxes are, compared to history, extremely, extremely low. So the president has put forward a Republican-esque plan, a plan that we would call a mainstream right-leaning Republican plan only by 5 years ago's metrics. Yeah. He's put forward that plan, and I think we're going to see a convergence here where the Republicans are preparing to take a plan that a Democratic president is putting forward, a Republican plan essentially that a Democratic president is putting forward, and they're, I think, preparing to take it and claim it as a victory. And for them, frankly, and unfortunately, it would be a Republican Party, a conservative movement victory.
Right. And if all of the added revenues are the consequence of closing tax loopholes, and God knows there's enough of them out there, so that there are no actual increases in marginal tax rates, they can continue to make the claim that they've been loyal to God Grover, and now they've got a deal with the president, and meanwhile they succeeded in getting the first Democratic president in a long, long time. I mean, I suppose you can argue that Bill Clinton did it somewhere, with destroying welfare as we know it, to shoot the traditional Democratic Santa Claus of Social Security.
And look, this is the same week that President Obama went on record saying through his top economic advisor that he prefers cuts to Social Security through the so-called chained CPI. Those will be big cuts. So now we have a Democratic president on record saying that he prefers this. What's amazing about this, and also sickening, is that you have a Democratic president who just won re-election, a Democratic United States Senate, and a Republican Party in control of the House only through gerrymandering. Remember, Democrats got more votes for the U.S. House total than the Republicans. Yeah, so the only way the Republicans... That's right. So the crazy thing is that the Republicans are in such a politically weakened position and yet are effectively driving the legislative agenda. They have effectively created the situation where a Democratic president is championing their agenda.
Why would Obama do that, particularly when you look at the polling out that the Congressional Progressive Caucus's budget, which is, a genuinely progressive budget that also balances the budget over a 10-year period, is far and away preferred by the average American, including most Republicans?
Well, I think the answer to that is because you have to ask who do politicians in general, who does this president in specific answer to? Do they really care about where the public stands or not? Look, you've got a long-time movement of millionaires and billionaires on Wall Street who have been trying to cut Social Security, trying to privatize Social Security, trying to effectively privatize Medicare. They see big profits in that, and they also see doing that as a better alternative for them personally than closing tax loopholes or raising taxes. So this has been a long time movement, and so I think when you ask the question, why is President Obama putting forward Social Security cuts? Why is he putting forward a Republican-esque budget plan? The answer is, I think, because he's not answering. He doesn't feel like his constituency is necessarily the average voter. He thinks that his constituency are his donors, and he's a guy who's raised a huge amount of money from the same forces that have championed this agenda for years.